Welcome back to Crudo.com. In this next video on conditional formatting, we're going to take a look at how we can highlight an intersecting point. Here, check it out. All right, right here in my example, I have a future value of $1 table. And what that really means, just to give you an understanding if you're not familiar with that, it's just saying what will an investment be in one period from now if we're investing at 1%, or 10 periods from now if we're investing at 1%, or 10 periods at now if we're investing at 8%. So this is pretty simple to go ahead and visually find, hey, 7, and I'm looking at 6. And so I know that 1.501 is my intersecting point. I can multiply my initial investment by that amount to therefore finding my future value. But instead, we could turn this into a smart table that can find it for us just by simply changing this to 6 and then changing this to 7. And then Excel will highlight for us where that intersecting point is. So to go ahead and set this up, I put in here data validation so that the periods are only showing these periods and the rate is only listing these rates here. The real magic comes into what type of a formula did I have to write to therefore having Excel evaluate true for the cell, which would then therefore get the formatting, which is what we've been doing all along. So to make this magic happen, let's go ahead and write off here to the side the formula. Now, when you think about this mentally, you kind of think, all right, I need to look up, or I need to match something, or I need to index, this point right here and find where, the periods equals 6 and the rate equals 7. How can I do that? You can basically do that with any type of a lookup, match, or index formula. But let's first do it with a match formula where I'm going to match the periods, and I'm going to match it against these rows here in the period rows. And I'm going to lock that up because the location of this period will never change. And I want to put a comma. The lookup array, this is going to seem kind of weird because typically you say, oh, this whole range or something. But this time we're just going to say, hey, we only want right here. This is all we want to look up. And we want to lock it up on this column because we don't want it going right. We want it to stay on column B. So I'm going to rotate through 3 times and put a 0 for an exact match. Now, when I drag this down, you'll notice why I want this to happen, because it's only going to populate one time and it's only going to be on this row. So when I drag this over, you'll see that it's always on row 6. And then when I change it to, say, row 3, the formula will update, and now it's only on row 3 where it's populating that number 1 on. Let's get rid of this now. And let me quickly just show you, we could have used a VLOOKUP formula on this as well. So the lookup value, same thing, period 3, lock it up, comma, table array, exact same thing. I'm just going to click one of them and then rotate through 3 times to lock it up on the column. The column index number, well, I only have 1 column, so I can only put 1 in there. And then the lookup is going to be false because I want an exact match. And when I drag this down, it's going to be the same thing where it's going to show right here as being only row that it matches. Notice that the numbers are different, but those numbers are not significant in what we're trying to achieve. So let me delete this. Just wanted to show you that you could achieve the same thing writing it with a VLOOKUP formula. Then across the top, let's use the match formula and find the rate of this amount, the 7%, lock it up with F4. The lookup array, just like we did going downwards, we're going to do that going across the top, and this time locking up on the 8 or the rows and letting the columns continue to go down and across. We're looking for an exact match, so we want a 0 and the parentheses, hit enter. Let's copy that down a few, and then we finally see in column U here that number 1 is returned. And when we drag this one down, you'll see that it's always number 1 in this column. Let me undo that, Control Z. Now the next step of how do we connect the two together to therefore evaluating something only on the intersecting points of these two? Well, that's pretty simple. We can just say, hey, when this is a number, which is always going to be a number on this row, and when we add it to this number, which is always a number on this row, so when we put the two formulas together, the only time that it will evaluate is at this intersecting point right here. Then at that point, we can use the isNumber formula to say, hey, is that a number? And of course, this is the only one that would be a number. Let's go ahead and combine the two together and create a true or false statement here. So I'm going to pop into the columns and grab this formula, this match, and then I'm going to pop in here and add them together. And now when I go ahead and go over and then down and hit enter, you can see that the only time that this is true is right here. Let me get rid of this top piece. Now I have all errors with one cell returning a value. So from this point, it makes it even easier. We can pop into this formula and wrap it with an isNumber formula. All of the other statements are not numbers because they're errors. And when we populate this, the only one that's true is right here. All the rest are false. So yes, it does take a couple steps of going through and trying to figure out how it all works. But once you start understanding the logic of what we're trying to achieve, a true or false statement at the end and making sure that it will evaluate to true on the cell that we want formatting becomes very easy. And so I'm going to pop into the top left formula, copy this whole formula, Control C. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to start, remember, at the top left corner because that's the formula I grabbed. So now this is the active cell. Come in here to my Home tab on the ribbon, do our conditional formatting. Let's clear our rules from the entire sheet. Now this is gone. Let's go back in and put in this formula. So let's come down here to the formula part of the rule and let's scooch over to make sure that we can see it. Control V. And format this as a fill, a darker fill with a font of white, and OK again, and it's set up. So we can get rid of this over to the right, delete it, come back, test it, change this to 6, change this one to 9, and you can see it's working flawlessly. Now in this example, as you saw, I did it in a match formula, but you saw that at the beginning I did show you how to do it in a VLOOKUP type of a formula. Now, if you do a VLOOKUP, you can do that a vertical VLOOKUP with this column, but you'll have to use an HLOOKUP for going across horizontally. Go ahead and give it a try and see how that works, and that will help solidify the learning of how you can set this up on your own.